Okay, good morning everyone. Please take your seats. Let's get started. I said take your seats. Let's get started. Hey! Hey! Shut the hell up. Sit down. Good. Hello everybody, welcome to your first day. My name is Mr. Macintosh. You can call me Mr. Mac. Let's pull up my list today. Okay. Now, a couple things we need to go over. You are in Villain 101. That means you're at the bottom. Doesn't mean you can't make it to the top. Just means you aren't there right now. Of course, some of you might fall flat on your face and get knocked out in the first couple episodes as sort of like an introductory kind of thing, but you know what? Some of us take the fall. Okay, now, does anyone have any questions before we begin? Okay, wow, a lot of hands. Alright, yes, you in the front with horns. When is lunch? Is that important? Okay, everybody, lunch is at 11:30. Okay, any other questions? Why'd you all put your hand down? Whatever. Okay, so, let's get started. First things first. Let's go over the syllabus for today. Since it's our first day, I need you guys to get this signed. The syllabus shows you everything that we're going to be going over this entire semester. The syllabus is kind of sort of, shall we say, a contract. We'll just call it that for now, since there's not a better word for it so far. It's basically just telling you guys everything that we're going to be going over this semester, so that nothing surprises you. Although, villains need to be ready for surprises, so that could mean pop quizzes, that could mean surprise tests, new lessons that come out of a mistake that somebody made, but I digress. Mostly, we're just going to be going over everything on this list. A few things about me. I have been teaching here for about 7 years now. I hate it. Don't make me hate it any more than I already do. Thanks. I have a cat, 2 of them. Let's see, I like to go for walks. I like to go on blind dates, go to rock concerts and boo the people up on stage because rock is kind of overrated. I more listen to the Asian fusion. It's kind of something you might have never heard of. Would be surprised if you did. Let's see what else I like. I like to watch my students fail. I love to watch you fail. Because it shows that you don't have what it takes. You're somebody that will get knocked out in episode 2 as sort of like a trial. Somebody that can't even come up with a good enough plan to stop somebody for more than 3 or 4 minutes. You put up barriers and walls around somebody that's so dim-witted they can barely remember their middle name, and yet you still fall on your face. That gives me a lot of pressure. And I like kayaking. So that's pretty much everything about me. If you want to know anything else, don't ask, because you don't need to know anything else. So suck it up, Junior. Okay, so first things first, let's go to the back of the syllabus. You'll notice that there is a guardian signature there. You need to have your parents sign it. Unless, of course, your parents were gunned down in an alleyway, or they were thrown in some sort of toxic waste, or were just exploded on a different planet several light years from here. You're going to have to come to me at the end of class to let me know that you don't have any parents and they can't sign it for you. Yeah. On a brighter note, though, mostly after the syllabus, we're going to be watching a movie. Don't get excited. It's not a fun one. We're going to have to watch quite a few of these over the years. Yeah, I said years. You're going to be taking these classes for a while. Why? Well, see, here's the thing. Villains, they need to be subtle. Can't be too cheesy or too overbearing to be successful. I mean, the cheesy ones are always good. You have your Joker who's over the top, but can hardly be subtle at times. But considered a great villain nonetheless. Why? Because he follows the mission statement. And as you see at the top of our syllabus, our mission statement. Before anyone looks, and I've seen a few people look, but I've also seen a few people who haven't so far. Those of you who haven't looked, I'm going to pick on you. Tell me what you think the mission statement of the villain is. You, second row, dumb cape. To beat the hero. No, it is not to beat the hero. In fact, that's quite the exact opposite of what you need to be doing. So, what else could it be? Let's see. You in the back trying to hide her head. Yeah, you can't sink any further into that seat. Sorry. I think you found pretty much the lowest you can go. It's not limbo. What do you think it is? To destroy the world. Wow, aren't we ambitious? You know, some villains just want to rob a store or rob a bank or something. You want to end the world, so I mean, you would die too. Just let you know that you wouldn't be able to escape that unless you got like a space shuttle I'm not aware of, but that's kind of high-tech stuff, and we don't really do that in 101, do we? No. As expected, all of you are wrong. The mission statement of the villain is as followed: to make the job for the protagonist as hard as we can without making it impossible. Tell me something. What is the most interesting part about being a protagonist? Overcoming adversity. Correct. Looks like we have somebody who actually can answer things correctly. I'll be calling on you very little over the semester because it seems that you already have it, and I don't like goody two-shoes. So. Alright. Overcoming adversity. That is correct. The most interesting part about the hero is having yourself go through a certain level of character development in overcoming an obstacle that is blocking you from a very large goal, something you would consider important to yourself. That is important. That is the entire point of becoming a protagonist. If you want to overcome adversity, that's the class you should be in, not this one. We are to give them as much adversity as possible in order for them to have that character development required in order to be a hero. Our job is to make that as hard for them as we can without making it quite impossible. If you were under the presumption that you're here to learn how to beat the hero into submission, then you're wrong. There are times where we can actually beat the protagonist and have them go through a sort of humbling process before coming back and beating us. It's a part of being a villain. We need to adjust. Our job is to assist the hero in becoming stronger. I would even argue that us villains are more of an ally to the hero than any of their allies are to them, because nobody makes them stronger than we do. Now, that is the mission statement, but it goes a little deeper than that, doesn't it? Let me pull up my PowerPoint here. Now, let's go over some myths. Now, we talked about giving them adversity and making them go through a sort of character development, but what about some things that are not quite right? Not quite as, People think these things about villains, but they're not quite true. Does anybody have any idea what those are? Now, I just said that villains, let me move my PowerPoint here. Villains may need to make it as hard as they can without making it impossible. Now, usually, in most scenarios, we would have the hero win, but that's a myth, that the hero always wins. Villains win sometimes. Not for very long, but we do. Sometimes we will come up to a point where the hero has gone through enough character development that he needs a humbling process, and that's what I mean. We beat them. We either take a loved one, we either, just beat them in combat or steal their goldfish, whatever it is. We defeat them in a way that they cannot come back from. In that moment of time, it seems all is lost. But then they have to dig down deeper. It's to give them even more of an adversity. And then there are some times where the villain just wins. He wins the war. Usually that's a setup for a secondary protagonist, but sometimes villains win the rivalry. That's something you have to remember. You could end up like that if you are successful enough. However, we never, ever beat the next protagonist. That is corny, and that is tiresome. We need to make it to where the next protagonist has a sort of character trait that shows that they understand the mistakes of the past. That's what's important. We can win. We just don't do it often. So let's go over another myth. Villains cannot be loved. This one is important. Some people have it in their brain that we need to be the most hated character. Not quite true. Villains can actually have a lot of charm and nuance to them. It's actually important to making them a complicated and complex character. We need to have a sort of intangibility to us. That's the only way that we can possibly have this sort of... what's the word for it? I guess charm's the only word for it. Here's the thing about villains. People seem to think that just because you're an antagonist, you should be hated. An antagonist serves nothing but to give the protagonist adversity. The protagonist gives the antagonist as much adversity as well. So it's really a perspective of who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist. What you want to do is make that line as blurred as you possibly can. Make people question who the bad guy really is. Your intentions can be pure, but your methods could be wrong. See, that's the way that you could go about it. I'll give you an example. A buddy of mine, he played a villain for a while, and his method was to rob banks and kill police officers and security guards. Why? Because his entire family was a victim of police brutality, and the only one that survived was his daughter, who needs medical bills to survive. And now he is a murderer and a thief. It kind of makes it hard to wonder whether you want him caught or not. No? That's exactly what I mean. So, those are some villain myths, and we will be going over those. Let's go over the next thing in the syllabus here. Villain tips. Now, I'm going to have a whole class of these eventually, but villain tips. For instance, I'll just give you a couple small ones. Nothing crazy. You need to kind of develop that on your own. You need to kind of develop your own chemistry, your own formula for being a villain. But if you're one of those cheesy ones who want to do the laugh, I suggest you start it from your nose. Don't start a belly laugh. That's way too much. It has to be subtle, Now, I've never been good at the evil laugh, but I'll just give you an example. You gotta start it from your nose. It's gotta have a sort of low kind of it has to have that low, subtle sort of thing to it. And again, I've never been much for evil laughs. I don't really get into that sort of thing, but if you want to start one, that's how you do it. It has to be menacing. It has to be creepy and macabre. It can't just be over the top and cheesy unless, you're going for that kind of atmosphere around you. If your protagonist is, say, a superhero, then you might want that distinct, crazy laugh. But if you're into more of a dark, mature television show, or do you want to be an anime villain or a video game villain in a very dark and mature game, well, I suggest you have that sort of laugh, or none at all. Silence speaks volumes, of course. Let's go over another tip here just to give you an example. Let me tell you something, guys. Every person in this room wants to do one thing, and that's to be a villain. There is one phrase that is so villainous, no hero can say it, and it sounds okay. You fool. You fool. Just by nature, that sounds villainous. It can mean anything. You could say it after a laugh, like, you fool. You could say it in a sort of menacing, mocking, and condescending tone, or you could say it in an angry, like, you fool, as he tries to defuse your time bomb to explode the outer reaches of a city, but he accidentally makes the time bomb tick downward. Something like that. But you fool is such a universal thing. When in doubt, use it. It's a go-to. So those are just some villain tips. Some villain do's and don'ts. Now, I'm going to go over these in another class as well. But another thing that I've seen a lot of villains do to progress a sort of quote-unquote plot is to reveal their diabolical plan. Let me tell you why that's stupid. You're supposed to give them adversity, and you're supposed to make the plot extremely interesting. How interesting is it going to be if you tell them what the plot is? If you tell them what exactly you're going to be doing? That's ridiculous. Then there's no reason to watch the next episode or play the next chapter. There's no point. Why would you tell anybody what you're going to do? Actions speak louder than words. Show them what you're going to do. Don't say it. Okay? All right. And again, another class. But to give you another example. Here's another one I have thought of recently. Do not, if there are any scientists in the room, a lot of respect to you. Total respect to you guys. And I understand that you guys sort of have a different approach to villainous behavior. You don't have brute strength or power, or sometimes you're not extremely, shall we say, right in the head. You're a little, how do I put this delicately? Cuckoo. Now, do not make a robot version of the protagonist and expect it to beat the protagonist. That is stupid, and it's never worked. Or at least for long. Making a machine, making a mechanic version of a protagonist will allow them to see their own flaws and conquer adversity, but it's such a cheap thing. It's so done before and cliche. We're supposed to be giving them tropes. We're not supposed to be doing cliches. So, do not, under any circumstances, make a robot of the protagonist. If you really want to get that itch, if you really want to get under their skin, make an android of their loved ones. That is new. That is seldom done, and it is much more effective, not only to the audience, but to the protagonist. So, let's go with some do's. Always make sure the road for the protagonist's goal to be as difficult as possible without making it impossible. Now, we went over this in our mission statement, but what does it mean? Well, what you need to understand is that the road to the goal is the most important part of the story. If we make that too easy, then the story is boring. It's uninteresting, and it's probably a lot shorter than people want it to be. If we make it too hard, then the protagonist seems weak and uninspiring, and people won't want to cheer for them. So we need to find a nice medium. if we have a sad ending with the villains being way too powerful and destroy the hero without a second thought, then how interesting is that show? I mean, it's different, sure, but why would people be interested in watching it? Or playing it? Or reading it? People wouldn't be interested. People aren't really tuning into shows to see the villains. Sometimes, in some cases, villains are more popular than the heroes that they are counterparts of. That can happen sometimes, but for the most part, it doesn't. So what do? We need to make it as hard for them as we can without making it impossible. In a way, we need to hold their hand. We need to observe their limits and make things just underneath their limit. Just so they have to dig down deep enough so that they can do it without not being able to. I'll give you an example. Dragon Ball Z. Raditz. He had a power level of, about 1200, I think? Goku had less than half of that, so did Piccolo. Raditz made it a point to be stronger than Goku and Piccolo without being impossible to kill. Now, people underestimate Raditz, but here's the thing. Great villain, because he did it perfectly. He gave them just enough adversity to give them character development, but he was also conquerable. Goku's character development happened to be his death, which led to training. I won't go into the plot. Most of you have probably studied a lot of villains on there. There's a lot of important things you need to look after. We will be having an entire class, by the way, on Vegeta. It's important to understand sometimes villains can become heroes. However, if you want to be one of those character development heroes that are originally villains, well, I will have to eventually transfer you to another class specifically for that. We have an entire anti-heroes class that is not really available to students unless they want to transfer into it from the heroes or villains class. We'll get into that later as we go. So, those are some do's and don'ts. Let's go over some field trips that we're going to be doing. Let's go over a few. Look at your syllabus. I'm assuming most of you who are smiling and giggling and pointing to it like it's some sort of golden ticket to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, you've seen a couple that you're incredibly interested in. Let's go over a few. The Shadow Realm. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have been curious about this one, and I understand, but we cannot treat the Shadow Realm like it is some sort of joke. It is not to be messed with, and it is not to be taken lightly. So, I want everyone to stay with me as close as they can. It is very easy to get lost. That one will be in about 2 months. Okay. The next one is Hell. Now, I'm pretty sure you're already a little afraid, but don't worry. Lucifer's a buddy of mine, and he said that it's cool if we get the keys to the kingdom for a little bit, walk around, see the torture devices, and kind of pick his brain a little bit. I mean, who's a better villain than the king of all villains? I mean, the guy knows what he's doing. Believe me, he's taught many a villain to villain. So the guy is more than happy to give a sort of seminar on how he does things, and you don't need to copy him directly. He won't be offended. He's a pretty nice guy, contrary to popular belief. He's just playing a character like any one of us. But we're going to walk around Hell, and I would ask everybody to bring shorts and a short sleeve t-shirt. It is very warm down there. I strongly suggest sunblock. So, and then the last one we're going to be doing later in the year once I am sure everyone can handle it, because while the Shadow Realm is an area you can get lost in, and Hell is a place that you can feel a sense of dread in and just inescapable despair, we really need to harden ourselves as villains to be able to stand the Department of Motor Vehicles. Now, this place is beyond that of the Shadow Realm or Hell. In fact, I would say both of them combined do not compare to this place. I still don't like going there myself, but if for the greater evil, then I shall do it for the students. So that wraps it about up. I have everything. That's the syllabus. Please get that signed. If you can't, let me know at the end of class. I hope you have one of these. Obviously, this is a binder. Please have those for you. Have your folders ready for the next class. We're going to be using number 2 pencils, notepads. We're going to be dissecting Well, I was going to do puppies, but apparently that is over the line on the level of evil. So we're going to be dissecting something that nobody likes, which are wasps. So we're going to be dissecting a lot of wasps. And, hold on. Hey, you, in the back of the room. That's an awfully fake-looking mustache you got there. Does your cape have stars and stripes on them? Huh, a spy, huh? Yeah, uh-huh, yep. Watch him run, boys. Watch him run, kids. See that? It's a hero. Heroes never learn. And they call us assholes. See, that's the thing that audience members don't realize. Bad guys usually aren't bad guys. It's the heroes that are dicks. Jeez. How are you gonna... I mean, yeah, I throw a bus full of people at a person, but I expect them to catch it, not melt it with their laser beam eyes. Who's the real bad guy there? But I digress. If you have any questions for me, please save them until I give a damn. And without further ado, we're going to be getting into a video right now. If I can get this stupid remote to work. Where is it? Here it is. Okay. Come on. Stupid batteries. Okay, well, looks like I'm just going to have to reach up. Unless somebody has some flight powers. No flight. Oh, that's great. I just get the one class that doesn't get any flight people. Jeez, I bet Mr. Carlin's has about like 3 or 4 flight people. I don't get any. Does anybody have like really long arms or legs? No. Telekinesis. Nothing. Okay, next class we're going to be going over what everyone has so I can finally see whether or not you people are useless, and if any of you have nothing to offer, I'm going to throw you out of a 3-story building and pretty much try to find out that way if you can have any sort of use. Because if you can't save yourself from a fall out of a 3-story building, you're not going to be a threat to a guy that can pick up a car. So, anyway, I'm going to be right back. Going to go to the janitor's closet and get a stool, and then I'm going to put this movie in. So, if any of you start talking again, I'm going to come back and smack all of you. Okay? Alright. Another batch of losers.